Does traditional education deliver or fall short in educating and nurturing children? Introducing Aligned Learning Revolution, the show that confronts conventional norms and presents dynamic alternatives to transform education. Host Kahila Sivas tackles the foundational issues within classroom walls and advocates for holistic learning opportunities. It's time to reveal the strength of the innovative, holistic NeuroGrowth learning approach that goes beyond conventional teaching or tutoring methods, assuring every learner of a stress-free learning journey to unlock their fullest potential. Now, join Kahila Sivas.
Today, I have a very special guest on our show, Mike Nicholson. After spending more than 2.5 decades in the field of education, Mike came to a profound realization that traditional schooling doesn't suit everyone. During his extensive career, he encountered numerous students who unfairly blamed themselves for their academic struggles, not realizing that the system itself played a significant role in their challenges. In his quest to make a difference, Mike transitioned into a role of a holistic NeuroGrowth learning success coach. As the founder of the Fairmount Coaching practice, he brings together his rich background as an English teacher and his time as a school administrator. This unique blend allows him to offer students a powerful mix of practical experience and tried and true scientific methods. Mike's approach is all about boosting not only confidence, but also helping students become more independent learners. It's about recognizing that the cookie cutter approach of the mainstream education doesn't always hit the mark, and that some students need tailored support to address their unique learning needs. So thank you for joining me today, Mike. It's a pleasure to have you.
My pleasure. I couldn't wait, actually. I always like talking to you, Kahila.
Thank you so much. So let's go back to the time you were in the classroom and you were a teacher, then you were an administrator. So you have a very unique angle to this whole story and journey that you have. So tell me, what was it like being a teacher first and then the admin?
So being a teacher, it was fun. It was a lot of fun. I taught English and I taught TV and film production. I really enjoyed the TV and film production because it was so different from teaching in a regular classroom. And I wasn't being not held to, but there wasn't standards like testing and things like that were limiting me.
Mm-hmm.
And I found my groove in the teaching it, in that what I was teaching, the ability to communicate through a different kind of medium was really getting to students in a way that nobody else was. And the critical thinking and the problem solving skills that I was able to I was so proud of that. I was so proud of that I was always giving students an opportunity to think differently and to think critically. So I loved it. I absolutely loved it. But then I moved into administration, and it was a shift for me in my life, not just professionally, but in my life, because of how close I was, how much I got to see with young people.
Did your relationship shift when you got to that?
You know what it was, Kahila, is, and now I've been retired now for over a year, and I have been, the amount of reflecting I've been doing about everything. And I've also learned that you also have to grieve an old career, or something that was new to me too. There was a lot of that, right? But I've been reflecting so much about, and the only words I can say to explain it is my proximity to pain. So, and what I mean by that, and I'm not saying all I'm thinking about is how much pain I experienced, because I had wonderful successes and wonderful experiences with young people. But now that I'm out and I'm working as a learning success coach, and I'm also taking care of a child and everything else, I'm constantly thinking about the proximity to pain that I had of these young people that were in my office, because I was the one who was the administrator. So if they did something wrong, they came to me. And it was never just, there was always a reason. So when I say it shifted, it was my whole perspective shifted on learning and trauma's impact on it. And now that I'm out, my reflecting is about that trauma that I experienced, that proximity to pain, and how did that impact me? And how can I now try to still serve those young people that have that pain? Because what I was limited by was there's so many different conflicting things going on in the school. So if I'm in charge of students and getting, of disciplining a student, which I hate to even call disciplinarian, I would have students in there and we would connect, and I would talk to the parents and I would connect with them. They would know that I heard them, and and this student, we got in a lot of trouble, but they were thanking me. Like, I felt what that child was going through. But the second they left my door, I couldn't do anything for them because there was too much going on, that I had to deal with. Is there a fight? Is there a fire drill? Is there this, or that? And that's why on my website that I told you I was doing I'm writing little articles and just writing content. My first thing is called Outside the Office Door, because I want to stick with that young person instead of just, getting them out and running on to the next. I want to help them I want to help them heal. I want to get all of that out of their mind so they can learn. And that's the hardest part.
So you couldn't continue the journey that was started inside your room. It was outside that door, it changes.
Because all those conflicting things are pulling the students. Normally what I would do is I would say, well, let me take you to your guidance counselor, the school psychologist or whatever. And I would follow up, but that student still had to go sit in 5 different cinder block walled classrooms and try to succeed. But nothing changed. That person still had the trauma, and they still had and it's no one's fault. It's just institutional. So that's the kind of thing that drives me now. It's what drove me to you and what you do. So yeah, that was a big shift for me. It's what I refer to as my shift, where I just started seeing it differently. And now I just want to empower young people. It's all I want to do.
Yeah, and you can walk that journey with them. It never stops.
Yes.
It continues.
Yes.
They'll remember you for the rest of their life.
Yes.
The rest of their life. So it's beautiful. It's a journey. Our relationship with our student is a journey of transformation that we can create.
And we learn from them just as much, if not more, than they learn from us. That was my experience with it.
No, everything I have now, all of the stuff, this whole learning success coaching model, they taught to me. They were just telling me what they needed. They are the teachers when it's, but you have to listen.
Yes.
You have to listen from their perspective. You have to see things. And, we teach from this level down. I never wanted to teach like that. I wanted to go below them because I'd never wanted that authority over them. Like, I'm the teacher. I know everything. No. What do you know? Right?
Yeah.
Tell me what you know first.
Yep.
Because it's important. So that's really helpful. Go ahead.
But that's also what drove you to, like, that the education, the system is limiting. You want to get to the entire child. That's everything. And there are so many well-intentioned teachers who just can't. And because maybe years ago they would give up their own time to do it, but what were they giving up? The times have changed too. People are starting to, thank God, starting to value their own time. But now, like, they have so many things pulling them different ways in schools that it's just it's no valid way to try to educate a group of kids. Like, you always talk about this as one size fits all thing. And it's so true. And part of me feels guilty talking about it. I really do. Like, every time I have a clarity call or I'm doing alignment days, I find myself, I feel like I'm bashing education, and I don't want to do that because I don't want to bash educators, right? And I can't help it. I'm still beholden to it. My wife is a teacher, so I always find myself kind of hedging a little bit and qualifying and saying, well, it's not all bad, but it's hard. It's just, we're not set up to serve the entire student. Every bit of every child is what I always say to teachers. We need to serve every bit of every child.
Yeah, the holistic. It's a holistic
exactly.
thing.
Yep.
It's a holistic everything has to be holistic. So you touched a great point there that I want to go over, is this guilt, to talk about this school system. But we do have to, in a way, talk about it, because if we don't talk about it, there can be never, change cannot happen, because it's not working for the students. So I always bring it down to, if you're a store owner and you put a merchandise to sell, and the customer comes and says, I don't want any of this. And then you keep putting the same merchandise, even though the customer keeps coming and saying, all the customers say, I don't really want this. I don't see the point of this. I don't want this. And you keep putting, you're going to lose. Your business has to shut down.
Right.
So school system is doing the same thing. They're
Mhm.
putting things in front of the kids. They have no relevant. They don't see the purpose. They're not connecting. They are distracted. They're saying to you that I don't see the point of this. Can you help me see the point of this? And we're missing it. We're missing it.
And the more current generations of students are less and less inhibited in their willingness to call it out. Younger, 20 years ago when I was teaching, students came in, generally speaking, whatever we said went. The parents were like, yeah, just listen to the teacher. And for various reasons, students now they're demanding things. And it looks, I think, I'm afraid for a lot of people in education, it looks like something more nefarious than it actually is. So they think just students are different. They're acting out. They're doing this. No, they're telling you what they need. You have to listen. They're telling you how to reach them, and you have to listen.
That's the problem.
Mhm.
So we're not pointing, like this show, this podcast is about that, looking at the different perspective. Like, look at the teacher's perspective, look at the parents' perspective, look at the child's perspective, and the administrator, which you were one of them as well. So this is why, it's really important to hear your voice. As an administrator, you used the word, I was putting fire out everywhere. There's constant, right? You're running from one situation to another situation. So how do you actually, you have your own hands are full most days, right? Most of the days. So how do you then help a teacher struggling in the classroom, right?
It's so hard.
How did you do it?
I didn't. Like, you did your best, right? For me, it was always about human connection. It was always about letting that teacher know they weren't alone, but they are alone. Think about the job of a teacher. In New Jersey, where I taught, there's 180 school days, 8 periods a day in a high school. You only get observed for 2 periods of the entire year, right? If you're a tenured teacher. So that is 1/4 of one day that you are actually being supervised on your job. And that has its ups and it has its positives and negatives. But if you can't be there for these young teachers, especially, you can give them all the in-servicing you want. You can offer the support, model things. I used to, put them in observations, let them watch teachers who know, who do a better job of it or are more experienced. But there's just too many. We're all just being pulled in too many different ways in a public school.
So do you think the real problem is it's understaffed? Like your job?
No.
How many people could have done that? Or is it possible for you to do all of what was expected?
I don't think it's understaffed. Everything's understaffed. It's just, that's reality, right? It's also a public entity, right? So there's limited money. I do think here's my thought on what the issue is with what education is. The public education system in the United States started, 100 some years ago, during the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
And the idea is we're going to get students ready to come out and work in a factory. That's why there's bells that move from class to class. And I think we have to remember too, that there was only a certain group of people that those schools were for, right? Generally, if you were a person of color, it wasn't for you, right? So you have this idea of school with students in desks. Like, you see old photos, there's desks in rows. They're still like that, right? So
haven't changed much.
No. So for me, I like to say the institution is antiquated, and there's the willingness to force change is not as strong as the desire to keep things as they are. And that desire comes, to keep things as they are, comes from other various interests, whether it's politicians or bureaucrats who need to justify their jobs, or labor unions, teachers unions who don't want things to, they want to protect their, their employees or their members. And in the middle of all that, there's more and more coming down about what you need to do and what you should be doing, standards, and make sure you're doing this. And we're just burning teachers out.
And
just
we
got to
have
change.
kids, but we have kids exiting who can add, who can subtract, or who can read. So how are we preparing them for the real world? Where's
We're
the
not.
real world preparation?
It's almost like you have all these people who are driven. When I'm talking about these people, these teachers and the people that with the boots on the ground, who are driven to make sure that kid leaves and knows how to read and knows how to do math and is going to be a productive member of society. We all believe in that. But then you have the powers that be, and I'm not even saying, and it's not just school, building administration or district administration. There's states and counties. There's just so many things that people are dumping on the schools and requirements and standards they got to read. It's this giant uphill battle, and I don't know the answer, except for something like this. If every student could have personalized learning, that's beautiful, and it's rewarding. But there's still many students who don't, and there are very few people that the school system is designed for, right? There's very few, or very few type, demographically, stereotypically, and they'll be fine. But what about everybody else?
Yes, there's a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
It's also diverse. Our learners are more diverse than ever before. So
yes, and if in so many ways,
yeah.
I mean, just the overall makeup of our country. I mean, it's getting blacker and browner by the day, which is amazing because of the diversity and all that. But again, don't forget, it's 100-year-old white institution, and that resists change. So that's an issue, and everyone tries. Like I said, it's just there's just so many things pulling us so many different ways.
There's no union in the problem to solve. We have a problem to solve, but there's no union in solving it. We're all going.
Yep. Because everyone's got a competing interest. The principal is worried about test scores. Well, the test scores standardized testing only tests one thing, and that's poverty level. That's proven. At least in New Jersey, we had this conversation for years. The lower the socioeconomics, the lower the standardized test scores. That's all it was, right? But there's people like principals and superintendents and county superintendents who are pointing to that as their benchmark for how well that school had. That's what when I say competing interests, that's what it is. And then you're telling teachers like, I'm not teaching to a test. But then there's, so the superintendent's saying, well, we have to reach this benchmark of test scores. And that's coming down. The principal's telling the teacher that, and the teacher's like, well, you're telling me to teach you the test? And the principal's saying, well, no, but it's just competing interests at every turn.
Yes. So, if a administrator is watching this show or podcast, what would you say they could do in this? It's a mess. We have to admit it's a mess and chaos, which is okay. Because I always tell everyone that in order for a big system like this to change, as you said, or hundreds of years of system of, we've been using, it's going to take a while. It will always take a while to do that. While that's happening, we're doing something about it. That's the beautiful part about it, right? Like you and I and our other teachers are doing something about it, because we can't just watch it and let it pass by. It's too many people are failing. And when I left 12 years now, that is the reason. I said, how many people can I count when I retire that I failed? Not intentionally, but I know I'm failing them because I can see it, because I can't go to all 26 students at the same time, even 12 years ago. There was no COVID gap. None of that stuff was existing. It was just regular school time. So what would you tell the administrator can do in this chaos that they're in? It's a tough job. They're putting fires out. How can they support the teacher? How can they support themselves even?
That is a great question, and a difficult, when I say great, I mean a very difficult one to answer. I
let me ask you this. What would have helped you when you were in that situation? Like, what kind of, advice, or if someone told you this, you feel like that could have made a difference for me?
I think for me, and I had it for most of my career, is the support of the people above me and their willingness to let me take risks and try new things. And that was always about for me, I wanted to just take care of the entire student. So I had a lot of support in doing that because we can't look at this as a little factory anymore. It's not a little factory, right? It's not a factory that cans cherries. Everything's the same. And if a bad batch of cherries comes in, you just don't use them. So they have to change. I'll tell you, here's what I would say in a very simple way, in a very kind of nebulous way. When a teacher would come to me and they would say, I would like to do this. And I would say, if it were up to me, I'd have you blow the whole thing up and change it all. And let me support you in any way that I can do that. Because I believe that it needed to be turned on its head.
Mhm.
I think if that shift you're talking about is going to be a slow shift, I think administrators need to support their teachers in taking care of young people in every level. And they need to push the envelope about how to do that, right? And they need to be able to say, well, I want to try this. I want to try this. They really, really need to make sure that everyone feels like they belong there, because you're fighting so much when you have a school. I worked in a school that was pretty much the exact demographic of the United States, 80% white, 13% African American, whatever. And the issues that we had as far as diversity goes, because nobody could figure out how to make everybody feel like they belong. And I think that's such a huge part, because you're just constantly going to you're just fighting more than you need to. And this is why this question's hard too. There's so many outside factors, like parents who think they know more than everyone else, active school board members who are just activists, who are getting on a school board to just tear the whole thing down. I don't know if it's happening in Canada, but
stir the pot.
Yes, exactly. And that's part of the common discourse, nationwide, and it's just trickling down. I don't know, man. I think I would just say, do what you can to take care of the young people in front of you and to make sure your teachers are okay. Because I live with one and she's just now okay. But the past couple of years was really tough.
Yeah, I love that answer. Because at the end of the day, I always say in this show, like, this is my repeated mantra, is that there are so many people who are surrounding this child that we have. Every child in that school system is a child that we have to protect. And we have to remember that this child will make up stories according to how we all react and behave and apply whatever systems or whatever processes we have. So the ultimate goal for all of us is to protect the child. In any cost, right? So we have to, even if we're not working together, we're working in all directions. So at the end of the day, you can't have that child experience a trauma or make a story that I don't belong here. I'm not part of this. I'm not good enough. I'm stupid. All these things that kids can generate ideas about themselves. So we have to be careful. But another thing that I hear from lots of teachers, I talk to many teachers on a daily basis. I hear that administrators try to micromanage. This word comes up all the time. So why would administrators do that? I don't, because they already have so much to put out fire. How can you micromanage? Is that a controlled thing for administrators?
In my experience, the more confident I got as a leader in my ability to lead, the less I felt any need to do that. And I think people that micromanage are insecure leaders. That's what I think, because they would doubt their own ability to be able to do something. So how are they going to trust someone else to do it, right? And also, again, it's that other competing interest. If you're the principal of a elementary school, who's breathing down your neck? So that person's getting micromanaged, and like they have people to answer to. Again, if you're a strong leader and you have and you have, a certain amount of confidence in your ability to be a leader, then you can handle that better with somebody breathing down your neck. But it's just, again, it's so much, what it is, there's so many compliance issues, so many compliance constraints that it's become this big technocratic thing that we've lost the sight of the humanity of it. At least administration has. Teachers are trying. They really are. And that, look, there's subpar teachers in every building, and there's great teachers. People that are going to teaching aren't making much money, and they want to work with young people. And we don't let them because we as administrators are too worried about compliance issues and things like that,
Yeah.
And so we micromanage, like you said.
Yeah, it's the biggest complaint that teachers have is I don't have freedom. I just constant micromanagement in the classroom. And when I need help, they don't come. But when I don't need them, they're managing me.
Because you know what it is? When they're micromanaging, they're worried about their job. They're not worried about the teacher's job. Yeah. So when the teacher needs them, it's not as important. Yes. Again, it's all about people being pulled different ways and different pressures coming from different areas, whether it's from the state or from the board or from the superintendent. It is a mess, as you said. It is a mess.
So you decided to leave that mess. I decided to leave the mess, but we didn't stop though, because we didn't just come out and say, okay, let me just point finger back into that school system and say that's so bad, but we all want change. Our biggest mission is to change this so our students receive what they're looking for. There's something that they're looking for, we're not giving to them, right? So we got to change it. So as after you left, you were searching for a way that you can meaningfully serve your students. And that's how we met. And now you have your business as a holistic neurogrowth learning success coach. So how has that changed your work and your fulfillment, like satisfaction in life?
When I think about the biggest change is when you're in education, you're a teacher, administrator, no one is encouraging you to value your own time, right? And, I get into this with you, and it's all built around becoming the best you can be in order to serve the best you can. And so what I realized is so many of us go to serve young people, and nurses are the same way. They have this serving thing, and they draw the teachers, they will run themselves ragged for their students. And they think they're doing the right thing by sacrificing their own things on their own, the cycle of sacrifice. The perspective I have now is, oh, that's all. Like now I'm driven by the idea of autonomy and contentment. I journal every day. And those are my two big things, autonomy and contentment. And you know what? The first three things I write are energy, family, service. Do I have the energy to serve my family and therefore serve my community? And it's changed my life because it took that distance from it and that perspective to go, no, this is how we're supposed to live. Yeah, I could still serve, but I got to be the best me. And I knew that was true, Coheal. I knew it. I would talk to teachers who wanted to take a day off, and I would always be like, go do it. Go be with your family, because the best you is the best for our kids. And I knew that, but I wasn't living it. But now I see it so much more, and I'm so driven by autonomy and contentment and energy, family, service. That's it. And everything I do is for that. Those are my personal pillars, so.
Absolutely. And I was like that too. 12 years ago, I could stand and sleep. I had business. I had over 100 students in my tutoring business. I thought I was the most successful person, running my son around and, doing all this stuff. And at the end of the day, I could stand and sleep. That's how tired I was, that I did not have nothing left in my body or cells. So, service doesn't come at the cost of, a lack of self-care or loving yourself to, because only from a full cup you can serve so much more, and it has to overflow. You should have a cup that's overflowing too, so you can keep serving. So we forget that as teachers. Nurses are another place that service is so important that we forget. So in this business now, you have a way of teaching the students. You were earlier saying you were in part of the film, and you used a couple of words that I really love. our critical thinking. But also I think that was a place where creativity can come. Like when you step away from that school building, one of the things that happened to me, and that happens to everyone, and maybe it happened to you too, you can tell me, is your creativity comes back so much in power. Like you're so serving from that full cup, you have these affirmations, you're living a life of full and abundance. Start, like, I could do that. You're starting a podcast now. You know, you are doing what you want to do. You want to serve in a different ways, right? So tell me, did you feel that creativity coming back to you?
It's crept up on me. So as I said, and now that we're talking about it, it's hitting me even more. Moving from teaching to administrator was a big shift. Before I became an administrator, I was involved in amateur filmmaking, making short films. I used to, my two friends and I who taught at a different school used to run a nationwide film competition for students, and it was so valuable. We loved what it did, and it allowed us to be creative. So we would do that, and we would also kind of make movies on the side, and that was creative. Well, then I became an administrator, and all that went. And I kept telling myself, well, eventually I'll have time to do this. Eventually I'll have time to do it. And then it just became harder and harder. So now I step out of it, and I was in a fog for a while, as I said, and I don't know if I said it to you earlier. You leave something, you have to grieve that. You do have to grieve leaving a career. And Christ, I have a friend who I speak to often, who's about to retire. I worked with her for years, and she never spoke to a therapist, but she just started because she started in August because she knows she's retiring in June, and she wants to be ready. And that's really smart. You have to, it's grief, right? So now that I'm out of that bubble, I can only liken it to when I first had a baby in that first couple months when that's what it was like, right? And now I feel who I am, and the creativity is there. Like I have a student who I had to put together one of my students on coaching, I had to put together a 10-month long writing plan to work week by week. What are we going to work on? And I just enjoyed that. I enjoyed researching it. I enjoyed doing everything. I enjoyed creating Quizlets and doing this. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm creating and I'm serving and I'm doing all this. And then the longer I've been out, the more I've been reflecting on all of those students who were in my office who were riddled with trauma, right? And that's what's driving me now. Because then I would say, I knew the kid had trauma, and I knew I could have advocate for that child to a teacher and go, you don't understand what this kid's going through. Okay, yeah, he didn't do his math homework. However, you don't know what he saw this morning, right? And I called it, what I'm becoming more and more in tune with is my proximity to pain that I had for years, and I'm starting to think about how did that. I mean, yes, I knew it affected learning, but I never really thought about exactly how. I knew I could say, well, the kid can't learn if his head and heart aren't okay. But those are just words, right?
But how do you feel it? How do you feel it in your every cell right now? You're feeling it. Like, how does that look like? How does that feel like? That frustration.
Yeah, it's frustrating. So I thought I took kind of not a page from your book, but you have this unabashed goal of reaching so many students, right? By whatever.
2035.
And it's like
1.5 by 2035.
And it's called a BHAG, right? You ever hear that term? BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal. It's an old business thing. And that's what I kept thinking about. I'm like, how do I tell every kid they're okay? Right? That's all this is out of all of it. When I look back, I just want to grab every student that's a young person and just tell them it's all going to be fine, and that we're all made up of our own trauma, and that's okay. We have to learn how to live with it and move forward and just heal. So now I'm literally all about healing. And that's where you mentioned my podcast. And that's what I'm trying to do, is talk to people like you, mental health professionals, teachers, coaches, anybody who works with young people. And I want to celebrate them. because I think we all need to be celebrated. And I want to talk about how they manage their own trauma when facing a child in front of them who's going through trauma. And I want to just offer some ideas to young people and to parents and to anybody else working with young people. I want to offer some help or offer any small thing to say, try this. Maybe this 12-year-old can start healing now. You know, you didn't start healing till later on. I didn't start healing till way later on.
Lots of years wasted.
Yes.
In trauma
And,
zone, in the
yes,
zone.
and we're never
trauma
going to be
zone.
finished, right?
No, we're
So-
always progressing. Let me ask you this. Why are you so connected to trauma? There must be something you have as well.
Yes.
Can we talk about that a little? Because you have this intense attachment.
Yeah. I've always been pretty open with the things I went through in my life as a child. I had a very, very tumultuous childhood. I saw some things that a lot of people have not. And I'm not saying it's worse than anybody else's trauma, but there are things that I witnessed that I'll never be able to unsee or unexperience. And I didn't realize the impact it had on me until I was an administrator. And then I would see these students and I would just feel every bit of their pain, right? And now, as I said, I'm out. The next level of reflection is, man, I felt every bit of that pain, but what did that do to me? You know? And so yeah, I had quite a bit of trauma as a child.
Dysfunctional
And
family life? Is it
emotional
dysfunctional?
trauma. Yeah, emotional trauma. I once had when I first started getting help, talking to a therapist, I was probably about 20 some years ago. And I remember just talking and talking and talking. It was the first time I met this person. And she said to me, you know something? It's pretty amazing that you're a functioning human being, right? And I don't think she was trying to say, darn, you really went through it. I think she was trying to offer me some grace and go, you know, yeah, you went through some stuff and you got through it. The hard part's over. Let's work on that. And, you know, and so, yeah, I went through, I had quite a bit of emotional trauma, whether it was, I mean, I just saw violence in my house. I saw emotional abuse and, you know, I was the youngest of 5 and I'm a single mother who was, you know, who did her best, but, you know, I was, you know, I was struggling to get attention, to put it kindly, you know.
5 kids, yeah, it's hard.
Yeah. So, but again, I wouldn't trade any of it, you know, clearly, because I love who I am now, and I consider myself a successful cycle breaker. I have a daughter who's 5, and I parent so intentionally because of what I've been through, and you know, my goal is to teach her how she's supposed to be loved, because that's everything. You know, we all think, oh, it's so hard to love someone. No, loving somebody's easy. Letting someone love you is the hard part, right? That vulnerability is hard. And so I live every day with pure intention of being, how do I make sure my child can make it through her life with the best foundation possible. It's just all about it. I'm very intentional with all of that. So
yeah, very beautiful. So, you know, if you're a parent listening and you had trauma like that, you know, I had a lot of trauma as well. You know, I was constantly compared to the whole rest of the world by my dad after drinking, which is so fun, right? When a drunk dad compares you to the whole world, you got to sit and listen to him. Was the hardest thing ever. So I lived with that guilt because I started comparing myself to the world.
Yeah.
Rest of my life too, right? Because then I called myself stupid every time I wasn't good enough in other people's, you know, the successful world. So if you're a parent listening to this and you suffer too, you know, when I'm hearing you speak is you can set intention to change the next generation. It doesn't have to go on and on and on.
Yep.
Carry that trauma to the next generation. You're giving your daughter, you know, such a beautiful, loving space, setting that intention regularly to let it come. Even I set intention because I can become like my dad and talk in his tone because I've heard it so much. So, and when I get angry, I have to pull myself back and say, we don't talk like that. That's your dad speaking. how are you going to talk to your son? How are you going to handle the situation? Don't act like your dad. Like I have to constantly tell myself, even to this day, because it's in it.
And the hard part is, and this is what for me, I became a father very late in life, and I wasn't ready before, and I'm so glad I did. But for me, it's like I get so worried about the things I grew up hating about myself, right? I'm so attuned to, like, I'm actually concerned about seeing it in my daughter, right? Like I get so, like, I'm neurotic. I'm very neurotic. And when I see her acting neurotic or, being a certain kind of way, I have to leave the room because I don't want her to see that.
Yeah.
I don't want her to feel any of my own stuff.
Yeah, and she's
And
that
I've
at
gotten
that
very good
age,
at,
right?
I'm sorry.
She's at that age
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
she can
Yeah.
watch
Like,
and
oh,
learn.
yeah. Yeah. And I've gotten very good at the pause, right? Where if something happens, where in my house, if something spilled, it was the end of the world and there was screaming and yelling and how about, and it was, I'm very good at the pause and just saying, hey, let's just fix it. Or I'm constantly saying, just a mistake. It's just water. We'll clean it up, So it's the pause that I've worked on, and that journaling I talked about earlier in meditation, that helps with all of that, which are things that I'm trying to do in my life to help with that. But everything is intentional. I don't know how young parents do it when they just, like, a lot of people get married and they're young and they have kids because that's just the next thing to do. And, but there's no intent, there's no thought on how you're going to do it. And I'm happy that my wife and I did that. My wife came from a very much different type of family. So I kind of follow her lead, and we have a really, really good little unit here. And hell, we even put a vision. We created an acronym before Lucy was born. We decided, we sat down and we said, can we think of 4 things that we want this child to be, right? 4 traits that are the most important. And we talked about it for like an hour and came up with 4 things. And it's boldness, adaptability, kindness, and empathy. Those are the 4 things we wanted, right? Because for various reasons, for me, I grew up with a mother who was afraid of everything, who instilled that fear into me. And my wife's much more bold. So I knew we could counter that out. Empathy, we were both empathetic. Kind, we're both kind. Adaptability, we wanted to be able to. So we thought, it's almost like our little vision statement. We called it BAKE, right? Boldness, adaptability, kindness, empathy.
Nice.
And so, like, everything we do, when there's a decision to be made, it's, are we serving those 4 traits we want in our child, right? I mean, that's how intentional we were. So,
Love it. That's a good
yeah.
advice for parents to set some intentions, set some values, set some traits that, it doesn't mean you're going to infuse it on her, but you are aware of.
Yep.
You are mindful when you're parenting her all the time.
Because you know what? If you're not intentionally making from my experience, I mean, I don't know. I have 1 child and it's the only one I'm going to have. But in my head, if I'm not intentionally making that child the best person she can be, and especially as a young girl, the strongest she can be and the strongest will she can be, there's people out there who are going to do it intentionally the other way, who are going to try to intentionally, misuse her, mistreat her, teach her the wrong way. So it's up to you. It's up to me. Do I want to make sure I'm responsible for what this child is and what the child becomes and what she brings to the world? Or am I going to leave that up to the world? No. We'll do it. So.
Absolutely. So yeah, as a parent, if you're listening and you have traumas, it's really setting those intention and also making it aware that when your dad or mom speaks through you, when you're parenting, you can really feel it. Like I know when I'm speaking like my dad, I know when I'm speaking like my mom. My mom was very, very quiet and very like, she doesn't speak. She's like always in the quiet because my dad dominated the whole scene, right? So we had so I also learned from her, I'm not going to be that type of woman.
Yep.
I'm not going to let anyone treat me like that or, do things like that. Like my dad would do it to her. From a young age, I'm like, no. This is not a good equation, right? But as traumatized people, we can feel it, and that's the awareness and intention we have to set. So important. This topic is so deeply connected to you and I, in many, many ways, and we don't talk about it. That's another part of our society is such a it's like a shame to talk about these things, but we have to talk about it. It's important to talk about it.
Yep, because everyone's dealt with it on some level.
Yeah.
Everyone, like, okay, mine was, yours was an emotionally abusive father. Mine was an emotionally abusive household and an emotionally negligent mother, whatever. But there's things that happen in your life that had an impact on you, right? How many, like, I always think about, everyone went to school pretty much. Not everyone had the best teachers. Because I can think of all the teachers I've met over the years who have said some terrible things to students who I know they have to live with for the rest of their lives. So yeah, it's important because, and especially men don't really like to, talk about these kinds of things. And that's something I'd like to change as well. Like, we have a big responsibility in this world, and we all do, but you have to look inward, and you have to figure out where you're coming from, and through what lens are you taking in the world. And that lens is created by everything that you were, everything that's happened to you. And you can either, run from it and then try to fill that void with whatever, alcohol, like you said, your father was, or gambling or whatever, or you can own it, run towards it, embrace it, forgive it. That's the other thing. It's really about forgiveness. Can you forgive yourself for being this kid that you didn't like when you were that age? So yeah, forgiveness. I could talk about this forever because I worked very, very, very hard to become the person I am today. I'm very comfortable in my own skin. And it's because of things like forgiveness and forgiving myself. It's not, yeah, I can forgive anybody else, but it's forgiving myself. And just learning and moving on and understanding that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. This is all you got. This is one time around. It's all you got.
And everything that we go through, and there's a saying my mentor would say, every setback in your life was a setup for you.
Yeah, yep. It's so funny. You said that to me when you and I first spoke. I had retired, and when I retired, it was a very tumultuous thing. It was very traumatic. Actually, it was one of the largest traumas of my professional life. I was kind of run out by a very disgruntled group of people. They didn't want me there, and it forced me to retire early or whatever. It's funny because I put it in a questionnaire or something. I mentioned tumultuous, and then you and I spoke. And now that I know you, I get why you did this. But it was one of the first things you wanted to do was talk about that. Like, what was that? What happened to you? Because you said, no, you weren't thrown out of there. They gave you a gift. And I think about that often, actually. So
yeah, there is lots of, and we don't recognize it, right? When we're grieving, we don't see it as a gift. It's only later we look at it. Wow. I mean, thank you. What an exit that you gave me in a time I couldn't have left, because I love my students, I couldn't have left. I mean, when I left, there was a position that I was so qualified to get, and so would have done such an amazing job because, as you know, I, cracked the code of math. I can teach anybody math. Like, I can get anyone to learn math, even if they don't know anything about math. And I was so qualified, but they wouldn't give me the position. Year after year, I would I could help all those kids pass. Why wouldn't you give me and it's not even an easy class. It's actually hard class. And I was praying and hoping they would never give it to me. And I'm like, what's wrong? Why don't you see me? Why don't you see my gift here? And I'm like, you know what? I got to take this to another environment. It's not possible here. Why am I wasting? And also the question I always ask is, are you playing at your 90% potential or 10%? That was less than 10%. They didn't even see my potential, So only I had to do the change. I'm like, you're not going to give it to me? I'm going to find my 90% somewhere else.
And that's the gift that I did get from that last school I was at was, well, a couple things. Number one, I have breakfast with my daughter and I walk her to school every day. Beautiful. Right. And I value every second, even when she drives me crazy, when she takes forever to eat because she's 5 and we're running late, but I love it. And but it also it led me to, and I told you I've now, like, now that I'm out of the fog and I'm journaling and everything else, I know exactly what I know exactly what I need in my life. And it's autonomy. I don't want anybody else having control over me, control over my own happiness, control over my finances, control over anything. I want to go make my own mark, make my own money, and do my own thing and have autonomy. And that will make me content. I'm not looking for anything but that. Autonomy and content.
Beautiful. And create.
And create.
Create.
Which I'm creating again. So I'm so excited.
Yes. Yes. So tell me, why did you name your company Fairmount Coaching?
Fairmount is the name of the neighborhood I live in here in Philadelphia.
Okay. But I thought it was fair. You want to create fair. And
I didn't even think of that.
Today. I was thinking today you wanted to create fair in the way that we serve.
When I was going through this, because I think I didn't put that much thought into it. I was like, I got to come up with a name.
Yeah,
and it's funny, I knew what colors I wanted, the blue and the maroon, but I didn't know the name, and I just came up with it because I like the neighborhood. And now I have a web page. It's Fairmount Media, and that's where I'm going to put my my podcast. And my podcast is going to be, the goal is to have it drive people to my website to see me coaching as well. Like they're all supposed to work together.
That's
so
beautiful. Yeah, great vision for 2024.
Yeah, I'm so excited. So excited.
As you have control over everything, and that's what I always tell teachers, administrators. You have to give yourself permission to take that exit. If it's not working for you, it's not worth it for your pension. It's not worth it for your health care. It's not worth it at all.
It's not.
No,
it's not
at all. It's not. It's not.
It's really not.
And look at you, how happy you are now, right? If it wasn't for that exit, you can't have all those beautiful things that are happening. You're right.
I'm thankful every day.
Yeah, I see a book in your story too, because
that's down the line. I've actually thought about that. Yeah. More about
sharing.
I don't know, you tell me what you see.
I see sharing with men, because in our culture, men, even my son, he's 16, it's so hard for me to open him up and tell me stuff that's emotional, because he'll be like, I'm fine. And then I have to ask 4 times before he says, well, I'm not fine, but it's okay. I mean, the next step is, I'm okay. I'm like, I'm not asking if you're okay or not. I just want you to talk to me. What are you thinking? What's going on? It's hard it's just, it's in the genes, I think, almost. It's like programmed for them to open up.
Yep.
It's like, I can't get him to, and we have good relationship, he's amazing relationship. Like, we're so close together, but still it's hard for him to say his feelings.
I think in the genes is the exact way to put it. I think it's biological. Men are a certain kind of way. And a lot of it is, it's about being strong and being protective and everything else. And I just think we have to redefine what strong is. And
vulnerability is strong.
Yeah, it is.
It's the new strong.
Yes.
When you're vulnerable, you're so strong.
Because let me tell you, when I'm in a room with somebody who's, raging with testosterone, and they're clearly, and I become my vulnerable self, I'm now stronger than that person because I've put that person in a position where they're really uncomfortable. Right. I'm not saying I'm trying to be dominant, but I've been in these situations. And so, you think that's what strong is. You might be physically strong. You think you're emotionally strong, but your strength is all trying to suppress things. Mm-hmm. I'm not using my strength doing that. I'm using my strength to share that and build something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see a book. What were you thinking? What would you write about?
Well, I was just thinking if, hopefully when I get this podcast off the ground, I could find a yearly book on, transcripts of a podcast and then how it affected me. But it could be both of those. It could be, 12 guests and where I was in my own life at that point when I was talking to them and how it impacted me, but all about trauma and just being vulnerable. So I don't know. One thing at a time. My wife's already on me for trying all these different things.
We can have visions.
I have visions.
Yes, my husband would say she's crazy too, because I have a list of stuff I want to do before I'm gone from this world. Because why waste?
That's right.
Yeah. So let me ask you a tip for parents who are watching, who may have experienced trauma like you and myself. what should they always remember when they're parenting?
That it's not about them. That's a hard lesson, right? The hard lesson is to not take things personally. One of a book that a good friend of mine gave me was the Four Agreements. I don't know if you ever read the Four Agreements, but the second one is take nothing personally. And I think if you're a parent, there's two ways this is just me thinking out loud. There's two ways you can consume that engagement with your child when the trauma comes out. You can consume it through your lens of how you had your own trauma with your parents or whatever, or you can consume it through their lens, right? Put yourself in their shoes and help them understand that this is a moment of them feeling pain. It has nothing to do with when you were that age, has nothing to do with when you were 5, has nothing to do with time your father spanked you. It is that child is feeling something right now. Don't take it personally. Put your hand out and offer some love and some help. Right? It's all about understanding that you have a choice. You can turn it into something about you, or you look at it as just a moment in that child's life.
And also you want to end this cycle, because
Yes.
that trauma cycle, I find that it's the way my father grew, then it was the way his dad grew. Like it's a
Yep.
generational, it's almost
Yep.
like a curse that occurs. And a one time one person has to say in that generation of, the family line, have to say, this is not going to happen anymore.
Yeah.
We're stopping this trauma to
Yep.
continue. I'm not going to be an abusive dad or mom because of my dad or because of my dad's dad.
Yep.
So we have to take conscious decision to end that.
Yeah. And I didn't realize how hard it was. And
Yes.
and it wasn't that it was hard to break a cycle for me. It was that it was hard. I refused to I didn't want to have children because I didn't want that cycle to continue.
Yeah, that's another thing, right? You can prevent yourself from enjoying children.
Yes, that makes yes. And it took me a long time to get to the point where I go, yeah, this is what I want to do. And man, thank God, thank God.
And if you don't work through it, you'll never have children, because you would always be afraid that I could be a bad dad or a bad
Yep.
mom. Because
that was always my concern. I think I said it to you earlier. I was devastated at the thought of watching my child. This is before I had a child. I still struggle with it a little, but devastated at the thought of watching my child do something that I hated about myself, act like me in a way that I was not proud of, something, that proud of myself. And normally for me, it was being really hard on myself and calling myself stupid or giving up too easy on something. And that was like, yeah, I'm just not going to do it. Just not going to do it. Then you find the right people and you right person and you take the leap. And then the work starts, really breaking the cycle.
How much of this work you want to do with kids? Like, is your coaching going to involve that as well? Do you have a student who has trauma, helping them and their parents?
My goal is to be, the reason I called my company Fairmount Coaching was because I knew before I even started this podcast, before I even reflected so much, I knew I eventually wanted to do teen life coaching as well. So I wanted to have, my thought was, if I have it just Fairmount Coaching, I could have different levels, and also different types of things. Like my wife is certified in elementary ed. Like if I could ever get her to leave and, we get to a point where I can get her, maybe it's different type of coaching. So I was just trying to keep it very general so I could do that. Yeah, that's my goal. I just, you just want to grab every kid and tell them, don't you? You just want to say, I promise you, you're not as bad as you think you are. You're not as broken as you think you are. And there's not an adult around you who has it all together as much as you think they do.
That's a big one for me. That one was big. The last one you said was a big for me. Always I thought, why is it that everyone's life is okay except mine? I was always alone because no one told me that they all, like I couldn't, because my dad compared me. So, that's a comparison statement as well, right? Everybody's okay except me.
So in my podcast, my podcast is called Your 12-Year-Old Self. And, because I watched I got a meme once a couple months ago, it was on my reels, and it just said, hey, imagine standing outside the bedroom, standing at the bedroom door of your 12-year-old self, and you're sitting in there, what would you say? Well, Kohila, I got halfway through that thing. I knew where it was going, and I was just overcome with emotion. It hit me like I was like, man, I don't know what I could see every bit of it. I could see the wood trim. I could see the color of the carpet. I could see my bed. I could see me sitting at it. But I was it really hit me emotionally, you know? So I started thinking about it and I went, oh, this is something I could do. So it's turned into, I'm interviewing people. And the reason I bring it up is that thing we just talked about. What the last thing I ask people on this podcast is, what would you say to your 12-year-old self? And then also follow it up with, what are some very minor, some small, feasible, actionable things you could say, or tips you could give to a parent or a teacher or a coach, anybody who's working with young people, that would help them learn, to help them start healing now. And that my one interview I just finished editing, I was working on it before you and I got on, was she said, I think it's important to be vulnerable and let them know that you did not have it all together when you were a child, when you were that age. Show them your warts, or be honest about your warts, and be honest about the things you did wrong. Because you just said it, that's a big deal. Those students, think about it. Those kids are coming into a school. This woman was a teacher. And if their parent is not a great parent, their parent is not something they aspire to be, but they look at you and they say, oh my God, this guy's got it all together. This woman's got it all together, but I'll never be there. Then when you say those words, like, she's like, this woman teaches, she's a nationally board certified teacher. She's been a teacher of the year. She's got her doctorate. She's whatever. And she tells him, she goes, I got a 1.6 my first year in college because I didn't know what the hell I was doing, you know? So I think that's real. I think I'm glad that hit you, because that was her takeaway on my episode of that pod. And I was like, yeah, that's really, really important, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a very nice title. I thought you would have called it, what was the first thing you said at your office? What's on the other side of the door?
Oh, on the
What
side of the
happens
office door. I know. I never even
that
thought
would-
of that. For me, no, because it was that little. And apparently what's interesting about that 12-year-old self thing is,
yeah, that's pretty good
I
too.
ran into my friend the next day, a man friend of mine, who we are both very vulnerable and talk to one another. And I brought it up to him because, yeah, my therapist just had me do that. So it was like really weird. Like, I'm like, oh, there's too many things going. And this guy's a TV producer and stuff. So I'm like, hey, can you help me? I talked to him the next day. Can you help me put this idea together? So
Beautiful. I like the title.
yeah, I
Awesome.
love it. I love it. It's neat. I think there's people out there who would find it interesting. So
And also,
again, for me, I wrote up my project plan for it. And the idea was, what are my goals? To bring traffic through my business and to help young people heal. Right.
serve people,
That's
yeah.
and they're all intertwined.
Yeah.
So
I was going to add that that inner child, that traumatized inner child, they always live inside of you. Even now, I have my inner child, that that 12-year-old girl, So one
Yeah.
of the things I did when I came to Canada, because English was my second language, is told myself that I would mute myself in school so no one will realize that I can't speak English. That was my protection mechanism. Great idea, just do it. And I went unnoticed for many, many years. Nobody even noticed that I wasn't speaking, right? I was just, I pretended like, yeah, everything was good. So now when I go into presentation, now I'm speaking on stages and all this, my inner child will come and say, remember, you can't speak English. Like, it actually speaks to me. And I'm like, what are we talking about? I am not 12-year-old anymore. I'm not suffering with English. I have enough English to speak. I don't need your help. So we have that inner child always, because it's trained, right? It's the trauma. It's in the wiring. So it's going to come up and talk to us when we have to realize it's talking to us. And we have to keep talking to that inner child and tell it that was then you protected me.
Yep.
Now I don't need that advice.
I was talking to, I work a day job at Temple University here in Philadelphia, and I work with young people, helping them with their academics. But I was interviewing for another job, and the job is called a youth employment program. And the idea is they serve 16 to 24-year-old young people from the city of Philadelphia who don't work. But anyway, one of the guys, a sociologist, and he said to me, what are you going to do? What would you do if, these guys, we talked about trauma. He said, these young people bring trauma in every day. You know that. And I go, yeah, I figured, and he said to me, well, what are you going to do? How are you going to handle it? And I bring this up because this is another thing that had me leap towards this podcast. And I said, well, I think I would make sure I'd be the adult in the room and blah, blah, blah. Right. And what I meant was I want to model how I want this interaction to go. I'm going to stay calm. And the guy was so stuck on my use of words of the adult in the room, the adult in the room. And he kept coming back to it. And I finally said to him, I go, what is it you're asking? And ultimately what he was asking me was, how are you going to handle your own inner child and your own inner child's trauma when this child's trauma is palpable? And I just thought it was such a profound, thoughtful thing to have a discussion about. And I never thought about that. And that's what I mean. When I tell you all these little things happened that caused me to reflect, that was a big one too. Really big.
Yeah, it comes to you. The alignment starts happening. The dots starts connecting. So it's amazing. Yeah, we can talk about inner child stuff all day long because I got them talking to me. I have my inner girl talks to me all the time. I have to calm her down and say, you know what, we're in a different era now. We're no longer there. We're no longer there in 12 years old or 5 years old. We're moved on.
Mine happens when I make a mistake or I drop something. That kid comes out.
Oh yeah, because you got in trouble.
He comes out to me and tells me that I'm stupid or I'm this. How dare you? You made a mess. You broke that. That cost too much money. And I
want to tell you something. When you said broke and you got in trouble, here's how my family was. Like I one time was, cleaning this bottle, and I think it's probably 5 years old or 6-year-old. I was cleaning and I dropped the bottle on the ground. It was a hard floor, solid floor, and the bottle broke in pieces, right? And I was so scared that I was going to get in trouble, and I can hear someone coming towards me from the other side of the house. I literally, in fear, I picked up all the bottles in my hand, like this, like that, and I started to hide. And I forgot that it's going to cut me, and it did. Like then they had to take me to hospital because all my fingers were bleeding. That's how fearful I was. I forgot it's going to cut me, How can someone forget it's going to cut us, right? And it's cutting me. And while I'm pretending that nothing happened, like, no, nothing happened, nothing broke. And they're like, well, the hands are, then they got it, so that's how traumas are. That's how fear, sometimes parenting can cost kids is we don't know what's right and wrong at that age. So we'll do stuff, right? Even if it's harmful. So this is a great conversation. I loved having this conversation. So thank you for opening up this trauma.
Of course.
Into, we have to have a lot more of these conversations and make it normal and be authentic and share as much as possible. So the other person, like I carried my trauma for almost, 27 years, knowing that I was the only one who was suffering from all that. And and it's shame too, right? Lots of shame. And you just want to hide it. Yeah, shame is another one.
Yeah, shame and fear, and like those are the things that I think about. Shame and fear and just mental health. Like when I look back, it's like it's constantly shame. You're fighting that. Yes. Yeah, I feel it.
So tell me, we're gonna on the show note, we're gonna have your new podcast name. Send it to me so I can include it.
I will.
Parents can watch it. If they can, join in on that conversation as well. But as we wrap up, what do you want, to leave today to our audience? So today, our audience is teachers, parents, administrators. I want everyone to know my biggest goal is that we have to protect the child. I don't care who's going through what. Everyone is an adult. We need to set intention that we have a child in our power here, where they are looking up to us. What are we going to do? So what do you want to do?
I would like to say this, and it's something I used to say to new teachers and every year at the beginning of a school year to teachers. And I would say this, I want you to assume that the 45 minutes that child is with you is the only time that child feels safe. And I don't mean it negatively. So what I say to parents and everybody else, I want to say, when you're engaging with a child, be mindful of the responsibility that of everything you say and do to that child is going to matter. And I think it's important to treat them in such a way where assume that nobody else is talking to them that way. So everything you do, everything you say is going to hit them really, really hard. I just think it's important that we understand that our words and our actions with regard to young people, they're watching and they're listening and they're mimicking and they're emulating. And I think it's important that we value the relationship in such a way that we really think about what we're putting out to that child for them to hear and feel.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Powerful.
Yeah.
Can't wait to hear your podcast. Thank you.
I can't wait to have you on.
Thank you. Anytime. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For being today. So there you have it. This episode was so different than the other ones that I've had on this show. So there you have it. The show with Mike Nicholson was amazing because it was different, because we talked about being authentic, vulnerable, and sharing our trauma. It ended up in that place of sharing trauma and how it affects our parenting if we were traumatized as growing up with our parents. And if it's generational, how it can be a chain of thing that keeps happening. So we have to be mindful and set intention that we can't let our inner child parent our children. So if you are one of those parents who had traumas or situations, you were abused or neglected, or you felt like you were never loved, these are things you have, whatever age that happened, you have an inner child that's living inside of you. And when you become a parent, sometimes you can see those personalities in your child. And sometimes without you wanting or without your awareness, you can turn into that person. As I said, I can turn into my dad, but I can also shut my dad down because I'm aware. Awareness is everything. If we're aware, we can handle any situation. When we're not aware, and that's when we can do harm. And we don't want to continue this trauma to our children. They're so precious, and we brought them into this world, so we have to help them grow up. And maybe their inner child is someone who's beautiful, someone who had so much beautiful experience. All they talk about is their beautiful experience. It's in the hands of our, us as parents. So I hope this episode was so powerful. And, as Mike said, he was an administrator. So from his perspective, he saw so many students struggling in their house. And that's why he's so attached to this trauma, not only because he was traumatized, but on top of it, he had this his door was a constant open door for many students coming in with so many different traumas in their life, but he can only help so much. They go back and we expect them to learn and understand the material that's being presented. When I think about my 12-year-old, when, I didn't have a night of sleep, I was so worried, I was anxious. Next day I go to school, I'm not going to be able to study. I'm not going to be able to take in information. That's how my life was for many, many years as a young person as well. So, if you have a son or daughter and your household is going through some stuff, if you're a one parent and if you're going through things, always take the space to set intention, help yourself first, serve from a full cup or overflowing cup, so that, self-care is important. As he said, he's using these journaling is powerful to, really get the awareness of who we are and our inner child's voice. If you can recognize your inner child voice in every moment of your life, it's going to give you so much power to parent. So I hope this episode was amazing and you have so much tips from Mike. He shared so many valuable information. And as a final word, I want to say, be vulnerable, be open, and be a person who can set intention and help your children, help your child, and put the most important person in this equation is your child. Make sure they don't grow up with trauma, and make sure no one else causes trauma. It doesn't matter, a teacher, administrator, schools don't cause trauma, because as parents, we have the responsibility to protect our children as well. And as a parent, as a teacher or administrator, always remember that everything we do to a child, they remember. Because if you ask me who was your favorite teacher, it was my ESL teacher, Mrs. Mayo. Why? because she's the only one who looked in my eyes and so many days and would tell me, you know what, I know you can speak English, because I was muting myself all this time. And she was the only one who looked into my eyes and said, you know what, you can speak. I want you to read this. I want you to stand up. I want you to speak. When she had that much of belief in me, I didn't have any of that. I started standing up and doing what she just told me. I just did it, and I was able to speak. All of a sudden, I spoke in the classroom after so many years of struggling and muting myself. I one day spoke because of Mrs. Mayo. I even remember her name. If you ask me any other names of my teachers, I don't know them, but I know her because she is the one who gave my voice back in an age that I did not have the power or the support to understand that I don't have to mute. I can make mistake and I can learn. So this is how it affects a child. They create stories and they can live in that story, and they can create more stories to validate the story that's false. And it's really important for adults involved in to see that child for who they are. So thank you for watching, and thank you for listening today. I'll see you at another episode.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. Our purpose for this episode was to spark a reevaluation of the current education system. For more episodes offering practical and comprehensive strategies to enhance learning, please visit www.learningsuccessacademy.com. It is crucial to ensure that children have access to the holistic NeuroGrowth learning approach, enabling them to break free from the constraints of an outdated educational framework. This is your opportunity to gain insight and break away from a flawed system, setting your children on a path to lifelong success that truly nurtures their thirst for knowledge. That's all for now. We look forward to having you join us for the next episode.